Mark chapter 15. Now, when we get to Mark chapter 15, Brother Kevin, this is, for me, maybe not for everyone, but for me, this is some of the hardest to read passages in the Bible. You've listened to me enough to know that I just like to picture everything. I want to know how I would feel if I was seeing exactly the details that are talked about. And I will admit that the next couple of weeks probably will be a little bit different, because if I have to see these, I won't be able to talk. When we begin to look at these scriptures, Brother Mark, when we begin to look at these scriptures, I just want to cry. And that doesn't get much done except make me uglier than usual. So, I don't know, it'll just be a little different. That's my get-out-of-jail-free card, so you don't wait in the back door to tell me, I need to do it better. Mark chapter 15, what we're going to do, we're going to look at three things. We're going to look kind of at the events. We're going to look at the characters, and then we're going to, if we have time, look at a couple of the questions. This passage is often called Jesus before Pilate, or Jesus on trial with Pilate, something like that. Brother Rick, I don't like those titles. I don't think they fit. What it really is it's Pilate on trial, and we get to see the decision he has to make. And it's a place we're all in the same exact place. Mark chapter 15, verse 1, and straightway in the morning the chief priest held a consultation with the elders and the scribes and the whole council. Now this is the Sanhedrin coming together and meeting, and bound Jesus and carried him away and delivered him to Pilate. This is one of the 7 trials Jesus would go through. It's a farce. We haven't spent much time, Brother Moyer, we haven't spent much time talking about how illegal the trials are. And I'm not going to go into in great detail, but they were illegal. We can go back from the very beginning, and before he was arrested, the sentence was already carried out. We need to find a way to get him privately, to get him away from all the people. We want to make sure there's not a ruckus. Why was there up to 1,000 soldiers that arrested him in the middle of the night? Because they expected a ruckus when they arrested him. They expected a riot. And so let's get him quietly away from everybody. And if there is a riot, we got to have enough people to control it. Okay? But from the very beginning, let's arrest him. Let's do all of this so we can kill him, so we can put him to death. There never was any idea of a trial. This was manipulated from the very beginning. It was done at night, illegal. It was done in a private home, illegal. It was done by biased judges. Matt realized, I think Matthew, maybe it's in John, I can't remember which one right now. But it talks about when they came to arrest him, the scribes, the Pharisees, and the chief priests were there. These are going to be his judges. You can't have any more biased judges. The whole thing was done by biased judges who had already predetermined the outcome. They were involved in the arrest. The arrest is illegal. Not only is the trial illegal, the arrest is illegal. Remember when Paul goes out to arrest the Christians? What did he go out with? He went out with letters. There had to be a charge. There had to be warrants. There was no charge. This trial, Brother Wayne, how can you try him? You're trying him to be guilty of what? They had no charge. There was no charge. There was no warrant for the arrest. This is just mob. Get him when no one's looking, because we're going to find a way. At the trial, there were false witnesses. The trial concluded in one day, which is illegal. Okay, it happened at night. What we read right here in the next morning, it's the same time period. Under Jewish law, you had to wait 24 hours after the end of the trial for other witnesses to come up and for those who were deciding the judgment to make their decision, to think about it, to make sure you wanted to stick with that. This is a mere hours. The whole thing is done as a sham to fool people. If anybody's looking, I don't know who was looking at 2 o'clock in the morning, but if somebody was looking, Brother Mike, they need to see that we meet. So first light, because this couldn't be at night. People need to see. This is what's done so people see. That's done at dark. This is what's done so people see. So at first light, as soon as anyone can see, let's all meet. Everybody notice we're meeting. Yep, we've decided. But that's not even close to legal. There was no 24 hours. There was no, even the sham in front of people was exactly that. The whole thing was illegal. And the greatest, it is a trial where you examine. Okay, here's the greatest failure of the trial. They never examined his claim. Brother Rick, he did speak at the trial. He said, I'm the Son of Man. Not only am I the Messiah, I'm the Son of Man. They never examined that. But Kevin, you know if they did, if they examined it, they would have found him guilty of being the Christ and being the Son of Man. He is the one who came to fix a broken world. He is the one who was promised. There's a lot of things that I struggle with. Why, how? But the longer I struggle, Brother Mike, the less it is, because I see me and all of the why and the how. I'm in the same place, and sometimes I do the same exact things. But here's the one place I really do struggle, and I just can't get over this. These were the religious, right? These were the religious. Okay, they had based their life on the fact that a Messiah was coming, the Old Testament was true, and when he does, and here he is right in front of them, and they never considered the claim. And they knew the miracles, and they knew the crowd, and they knew the prophecies that had been kept. But they never considered the claim. The people who said, God promised, and I'm trusting in God's promises. You know, that's scary for me, because you know what I say? You know what I'm building my life on? God promised, and I'm trusting in his promises. So when I start to say, why did they not examine the claim? But my Bible doesn't tell us, so I don't know that answer. But I can tell you sometimes why I don't. And that is, and I think it's pretty similar, actually. I think, you see, I've built this picture in my head of what it is to be blessed. I have this picture of what it's supposed to look like. What being a faithful Christian, doing the right thing, results in. I think they did the same. And what they held on to was their little balloon, bloop, you know, like a cartoon. This is what it's supposed to look like. And so, Justin, when the Messiah was right in front of him, they didn't even attempt to examine it and look at it. It challenged their picture, and their picture, what they thought life was supposed to be, is what they held on to. And in holding on to that, they missed the Messiah. It's just, I said there were 7 trials. I do want to throw this out there. I'm trying not to jump back and forth between all of the scriptures. But from the very beginning, we said, Mark just goes really fast. And especially when it comes to this time period, he gives us the information we need to know, and he leaves out a lot of stuff. I don't want to pull it all in, but if you've heard this before, you've heard that before, and Brother Mike, I don't want you to leave here with a question scratching your head too. But what about this? So we're going to walk through it real quick. There were what I would call 7 trials. The first one actually didn't start at Caiaphas' house, where we started in the book of Mark. Because when he's first arrested, he goes to Annas' house. And we see this in John 18. Then, after he's mocked and spit upon and slapped, Jesus was slapped. We didn't cover Jesus being slapped because he's slapped at Annas' house. Then he's brought from Annas' house to Caiaphas' house. This is where we've spent some time. This is where Peter denies him. This is where he's blindfolded. This is where he's punched in the face, where he's struck again and again. This is where he's bound. This is where he's dragged across the courtyard. And finally, he's dragged to Pilate. And that's where we start here. This will be the third. In chapter 15, verse 1, it talks about them coming together for their sham of a trial. And they bound Jesus and carried him away and delivered him to Pilate. The Jews were a conquered nation. They did not own the power of the sword. They could not put him to death. They couldn't put him to death. Here's somebody who thinks. I can tell every time I talk, I'm like, I better cover this or this or this because he's going to be asking me about it afterwards. So they couldn't put him to death. Well, what about Stephen? Stephen was put to death. He was. What about Paul? They tried to put him to death lots of times. Yes, but not legally. That was mob justice. And a mob could come up and they could try to stone you. That's what the Jews would do. But it wasn't legal. Okay. Here, this isn't mob justice. They need all of this to be above board. Oh my years, they needed this to be above board. Everything in the trial was illegal. The arrest was illegal. The testimonies were false. The whole thing should have never happened, but they needed it to look above board. Sometimes we just need the dirty, ugly mess of our life to look above board. And we think we pulled that off. So after this, and Mark really doesn't talk about this, but he gets sent to Herod. He's brought to Pilate. Pilate talks to him, questions him, finds out, you said the word Galilee. Not my jurisdiction. Go see Herod. Herod, by the way, is excited to see him. He's heard about him. Herod had his fascination with John the Baptist, remember? Herod's heard all these things. The Bible tells us he's excited to meet him. Thinks that here we are, this is going to go well, let's see what happens. It's not like Herod cared what the Sanhedrin said. It's not like they were buds. He could have really had fun with this, but Jesus wouldn't answer him a word. And what started out in excitement ended with anger and frustration. And it's there, it's here. It's in Herod's court that he gets the purple robe. Okay, king, you're the one who's going to replace me, huh? You won't even speak. You won't even talk. So they mock him. They robe him, and they send him back. And he goes back to Pilate. And here, when he comes back, Pilate talks to the Sanhedrin. He talks to the leaders. And there's like some argument there. What did he do? What's wrong? No, we're not talking about this. He needs to die. And it's at this point somewhere in here that he's scourged. And then Pilate brings him before the people, scourged. It's one of those things we really don't think about. Every Resurrection Sunday somewhere we're going to be talking about the scourging. And we won't talk about it again until the next Resurrection Sunday. And when we really think about it, it's the lashing, it's the blood, I can't get over this. You know, after he is scourged, what they do? They put the robe back on him. But here's one of those things I just can't picture it. Because when you have no skin left on your back, and it is just ripped to shreds, you know what that robe becomes? It becomes your skin. Just long enough for all of that to congeal and for infection to start and all of that to burn. And then you know what they're going to do? They're going to rip it off of him again. It's at this point he's scourged and he's brought out in front of the people. It's at this point Pilate says, I'm washing my hands. Find no fault. What do you want me to do? And we'll get to, I thought this was going to take 5 minutes. Justin, I'm in trouble. It's at this point that the crowd begins to chant, give us Barabbas, give us Barabbas. And then Jesus goes to the soldiers, which I would say are it's his seventh, it's his last trial. Because they had to make a decision too. Now remember, there's 3 years of ministry. Until those 3 years said, my time's not come. But many mighty works were done. Miracles were done. People were talking. This wasn't small. Well, Mark, we like to talk about, well, there might have been up to 15,000, maybe 20,000 people at the feeding of the 5,000. We talk about that, right? You think 20,000 people are quiet? There were 4,000 at the next feeding. Do you think they're quiet? A city changes because the madman is healed and the demon is cast out. You think a whole city is quiet? No, I don't know, we're pretty quiet. We can be quiet. Anyway, verse 2. And Pilate asked him, Art thou king of the Jews? And he answering said unto him, Thou sayest it. I got to tell you again, I'm not moving very fast, Brother Fraser, but I need to pick up speed. But this is one of those verses, if you go to commentaries, you can really, because they're going to say, And Pilate asked him, Art thou king of the Jews? And he answered unto him, Thou sayest it. You read the wrong commentary, and it's going to tell you this is Jesus denying that he is the king. No, what he's doing right here is saying, you have to make that decision. In fact, Ms. Melissa, if this is me, what he's saying is, it's just as you said. But remember, you said it. Because you know what you're going to be held accountable for? Your answer to that question. This is the purpose for which he was born, remember? He was born to bear witness of the truth. Which is why in Luke, Pilate would say, What is truth? Which, by the way, Ray, he'd already answered that question. If you'd done any investigation into trial, he answered it. I am the way, I am the truth, I'm the life, I'm the light, I'm the door, I'm the vine. I am. He'd already answered that question. Jesus knows. Pilate isn't, Pilate is not answering he's not putting any thought into this. You know what he's doing? He's parroting what he had been told. This is what they complained about, and he's just repeating what they said. Pilate's in the place we all are. He must decide who Jesus is. Verse 3, And the chief priests accused him of many things, but he answered nothing. And Pilate asked him again, saying, Answerest thou nothing? Behold, how many things they witness against thee. They're just throwing everything against the wall till they can get one to stick. Brother Fraser, remember, the only one they picked out was, he's a heretic. He says he's God, which they didn't investigate. But you know how much Pilate cares about being a heretic? So they got to keep throwing stuff out there. Because they need him to come back with the same answer. But Jesus yet answered nothing, so that Pilate marveled. Pilate was lost. How? All of these people, and yet no defense and no comment and no... In fact, in another passage it would say, Don't you realize who I am? Don't you realize I have the power of life and death over you? He must have gone home to his wife. Why would you say that? Well, look at Matthew. He must have gone home to his wife and said, How was your day, honey? Let me tell you about my day. My day, I stood in front of this crazy man. They were accusing him of all of these things, yet he said nothing. I have stood there over hundreds of people, thousands of people, and they're facing the cross. They're facing crucifixion. And they can't stop telling me why it's unfair. But he said nothing. And she said, Well, who was this guy? Jesus of Nazareth. And she gave him this warning. I'd have nothing to do with him. You better be careful with this guy. Brother Ivy, she said, This guy, he's special. Yeah, he is special. The Jews, they knew how special he was. He is. But at this point, Brother Hamilton, they're not ignorant. So how do you know that? Well, Peter points this out. Eric, can you give me a couple verses? Yeah, there we go. Peter in Acts chapter 2, ye men of Israel, hear these words. Jesus of Nazareth, a man approved of God among you by miracles and wonders and signs. Donnie, they saw these things. They knew these things. This had been talked about for 3 years. They were jealous and envied and didn't understand these things. They blamed these things. They tried to tear these things down. These things didn't fit with their narrative, with their value, but they knew these things. All they had spent for the last 3 years was trying to deal with these things, trying to manipulate these things out of being true and control how the narrative and how people viewed it and what they saw. And they didn't have CNN, MSNBC, or any of those to do it. They had to do it themselves. You men of Israel, hear these words. Jesus of Nazareth, a man approved of God among you by miracles and wonders and signs, which God did by him in the midst of you. He did it in front of you. As ye yourselves also know. Peter is not bashful anymore, by the way. Standing in front of them, he ends it. Do you get me? You understand what I'm saying? You know this. You know what that's challenging someone. I dare you to deny it. Fight with me on this. You can't. Verse 23. Him being delivered by the determinate counsel. I love this part. Brother Hank, you'll like this part. Ready? This part, you're gonna love this part. You may not like when I get to the end of this verse, but you're going to love this part. You know what it does not say? It does not say him being delivered by the determinate counsel of the Pharisees and the scribes and the leaders and the chief priests. It does not say him delivered by the Sanhedrin. You know what it says. It says him being delivered by the determinate counsel and foreknowledge of God. It's his plan. Let me tell you what you did. You thought you were working this all out? Let me tell you what you did. You did exactly what he expected you to do. But don't miss this part. Ye have taken. You did it. This goes back to our discussion for 10 years. We like to take out the fact that we did it. Brother Mike, he laid down his life. You know what that means? That means he surrendered. He laid it down. His weakness was into surrender. Because was he ever weak? He was never weak. He was always God. But he chose to lay down because he loves us so much and leave it our choice. We have choice today. They had choice then. They were wicked men. They made a wicked choice. But they're accountable. Ye have taken, and by wicked hands they crucified, and they slain. Peter says, all of this was God's plan. But you did it. And you did it knowing who he was. You made yourself blind. A couple things I just remembered. I remembered during all of this, Brother Mike, he was bound. He wasn't resisting. Why did they bind him? He needed to be bound because we were going to be set free. He needed to be weak, who could never be weak. Because in his weakness, he would go unto death, and we would be strengthened and given life. Now, where this really gets scary, Donnie, where this really gets scary, we're supposed to be like him. Puts a total new meaning to Colossians 3, where we die daily, where we mortify the deeds of the flesh. The world was broken, so the Son of Man came to restore it. Now, what would Pilate do? This is verses 1 through 5. How was Pilate going to respond? Well, Luke chapter 23 tells us he sent him to Herod. Herod sends him back. verse 6. Now at that feast he released unto them one prisoner, whomsoever they desired. This is talking about this time because of the feast that was going on. And this was not legal. This is something that Pilate did. Okay, why? Because he wanted to keep them happy. So in honor of the picture of the great day of atonement and the releasing of one animal into the wilderness, I'll release unto you one. I'll join the picture. Let's all be happy, get along, sing Kumbaya, and you guys quit rioting because they're about to take me out of here because I can't control the province. Because actually that's what was going on. Pilate was in trouble. It wasn't long after this, Pilate was removed. Who knows where I'm going to end up, but Justin, Pilate was against all of this. We see all of this, so why did he go along with it? Because Pilate was a man pleaser, and he needed to make them happy. Making them happy was going to work in his best interest, because Rome was saying, you got to calm this stuff down. And he was willing to compromise everything so that he could have his life the way he pictured it. He was willing to stand for justice and put a just man to death. As Paul, sometimes we read this, say, poor Pilate knew that this was unjust. He says it right here. I know they brought me this. We're going to read it. Pay attention to it. I know this is because of their envy. There's nothing to this. He knows it. He says, I wash my hands. Guess what you can't do? I probably won't get here, so I'll say this. We're not the boss. We don't make the rules. And God says, you must make a decision of who Jesus is. You don't get to wash your hands. Verse 7, and there was one named Barabbas. I don't know if this is true. Never really heard anybody talk about this. But if you hear Bar Jonah, Simon Bar, okay, it's son of. Brother Mike, I've never heard anybody, and I tried to quickly because it really doesn't matter. But I wonder if this is son of the rabbi. Barabbas. Wouldn't be the first time a preacher's kid turned totally rebellious. Hi, Daniel. I was hoping you were here. I saved that right there. In fact, in my notes, it says Daniel. I love you, Daniel. He knows it. And the multitude, let's go back for 7. And there was one named Barabbas, which lay bound with them. He was with them. He was with the other two that had made insurrection with him, who had committed murder in the insurrection. Okay, so notice right here, this is what Mark says. Well, let me tell you about Barabbas. He's a murderer. He's rebellious. He's one of the group who were fighting against Rome, and he killed a bunch of people. That's how he points it out. It's not how one of the other disciples points it out, by the way. They just keep going back to he was a robber. He was a robber. Hopefully we'll get there. And the multitude, crying aloud, began to desire him to do as he had ever done unto them. I want you to do what you always do. Release one. Release one. Release one. Release one. But Pilate answered them, saying, will ye that I release unto you the King of the Jews? Rob, I think with everything in him, all the hope he has is, please say yes. First, he doesn't want to release this rebel rouser who's killed Romans. But second, I don't want his blood on my hands. Remember, he's superstitious, and his wife said, have nothing to do with this guy. And everything about him is different. Everything about him had some authority. He didn't fear. He didn't cower. Don't you know who I am? Yeah, I know who you are. And you would have no power except my Father gives it to you. Nobody spoke to him like that before. But Pilate answered them, saying, will ye I release unto you the King of the Jews? For he knew that the chief priests had delivered him for envy. There's nothing to this. I know what's up. But the chief priest moved the people that he should release Barabbas unto them. Power of influence. I'm not going to get very far, so I'll say, Brother Moyer, one of the things we underestimate is the power of influence. And I'll take it even further. In my experience, I'm not as old as you. I don't get to say that very often these days, but I'm not as old as you, so I don't have as much experience. But in my limited experience, the power of influence for hate and murder and destruction, ready, is often greatest in the most religious. Now, I'm not just talking about right here. But I think it is often the most religious that cause the most destruction and spew the most hate and bring about the most fight. Brother Mike, I worked in a Christian school for 4.5 years. Someday you can ask me why it was only half. Actually, no, I started in a mid-year. So it was 4 years. There you go. There goes that. I can tell you without a doubt, the most religious in that church were the hardest parents for me to deal with. You want to know something else? So were their kids. Do you want to know why that is? Thank you for asking. You're always so helpful. Because when you're religious, all of your value comes from what you do and do not do. It is the most religious that have the biggest problem with grace. Yes. And Justin, he came preaching grace. And when you start going at somebody's value, most religious, as much as they don't want to admit it, here's the truth. They have done, they have sacrificed, therefore they are owed. And if you deal with what they're owed and you start taking that away, or you start saying this doesn't equal this, they have nowhere else to go. And they will scream, Barabbas, and crucify him. And you know how easy it is to be one of the crowd that says, no, give me the list. Give me that which looks good. This is how I get myself in trouble sometimes. What is it, Ray, what is it your dad says? In different churches, not in this church, but in other churches. And they cried again, verse 13, crucify him. Then Pilate said unto them, why? What evil hath he done? And they cried out more exceedingly, crucify him. And so Pilate, willing to content the people, released Barabbas unto them and delivered Jesus when he had scourged him to be crucified. Now we have all the evil characters in this picture. We have 7 minutes, and we're a page and a half in, but we have all the evil characters. We have the religious, the chief priests, the scribes, the leaders. I can tell you sometimes I find myself in that same picture. I want to throw the dart at them so hard, but I know sometimes I'm just like them. Jeremy, you shouldn't be up there teaching. I know that. I would sit and hide in the back if I could, but he won't let me. And I'm not talking about the preacher. Judas. I tried to spend as much time as I could making us sound just like Judas, so that I'm not the only one. Annas, Caiaphas, Herod. What we did talk about? Herod just said, I'm just going to ignore the whole thing. I'm just going to ignore it. I'm going to make no decision. That's terrible. I've been in church long enough to watch a lot of people make no decision. Sometimes it's about salvation. Yes, sometimes it's about salvation. More often than not, it's about the new day that he's given us. I'm just going to make no decision about this day. Sometimes we can make terrible decisions sound so full of faith. What comes will be God's blessing. I've not committed to read. I've not committed to pray. I've not committed to study. I've not committed to talk. I'm doing nothing in a godly way. Brother Ray, if you could do this, I would be very happy. Find a verse that says God's called me to do nothing. Pilate. All Pilate wanted to say is, it's not my fault. It's not my fault. Brother Kevin, your life is not my fault. Your life is not my fault. Your life is not my fault. Brother Jeremy, you're right. I know. But also, he said, bear you one another's burdens. Oh, that dreaded chapter 6 in Galatians. He said, if a man be overtaken in a fault, ye which are spiritual, restore that man, considering yourself. You don't know why? Because someday you're going to be tempted and in the same exact place, and you're going to need him. Oh, Pilate, not my fault. Look at that, clean, huh? The people, the crowd, crucify him, crucify him, crucify him. Here's another one of those things. Here you go. My new best friend. Here's another one of those things I just never got. How could these people be so fickle as to just like 4 days before this, Hosanna, Hosanna, Hosanna. You know how many sermons I've heard on that? And I just jumped right in there. But Luke gives us this idea because it says those screaming Hosanna were the multitude of his disciples. Brother Mark, I don't think these were the same crowd. Those were the Galileans who came in with him through that gate. These are the Jerusalem lights. Like that? I just make it up. These were the ones easily influenced who wanted to be part of that group who were running around speaking, inciting anger and hate. That crowd who was easily influenced and signed up said, give me the list, pat me on the back. I just want to be liked and fit in. There's a lot of that in Baptist churches. You know what I don't need for any of that? I don't need this. I need a suit, never wear jeans, cut my hair a little shorter, comb it to the side, sing these songs, don't sing those songs. I fit in. Anyway, the people. But if we go back, it was also the 12. And it's also us. We have to decide. And this takes us actually back to the beginning of the book. I'm telling the truth. This page 2. Takes us back to the beginning of the book where it starts. He is Jesus the Christ. He is the Son of Man. But we have to decide that, not for one time, because that will affect us every single day of our life. Anyway, Ray, we close in order of prayer this morning.